Good to see you again. Well, good to be seen, I guess. Although some of you do come up to me during the week and say that tell me you're enjoying what we're doing. So thank you very much, and thanks Scott Hancock for making this work for us. We are nearing the end of the church year. We have three more Sundays, I think, before the first Sunday of Advent, which is the beginning of our church's new year. It's hard to believe that we're putting another church year behind us, but because we are at the end of the church year, the readings assigned for Mass on Sunday have to do with end times, with persecution, with death, with life beyond death, so that toward the end of the year, having gone through the entire life of Christ ritually, now we are faced with coming face to face with Jesus Christ at the end of our lives here on earth. So the readings are somewhat sobering, but I find that they're actually exciting also. I'm not sure if I'd call it exciting about the gospel this Sunday. It has to do with, let's start out with the first reading. The first reading has to do with the death of the mother and the 7 children of the Maccabees family, about 200 years before Jesus. And of course, foreign powers are once again, Greeks, I think at this moment, are in charge of and have taken over Jerusalem. The Jewish people almost always in the Holy Land until the 20th century have been captives or subject to foreign powers in their own country. And so it was with the Maccabees family. They were having to kowtow to bend before the ruler in Jerusalem at that time. He heard about the strength of this family, how strong they were in their faith. And so he brought the mother, she was a widow, and her 7 boys to come before him and honor him, worship him. And each child, from the eldest child on down to the youngest, had the opportunity either to reject their faith or to join the court of the king. Excuse me, and they would be treated lavishly well. The mother, while her children are being subjected to torture to give in to this king, the mother is speaking to them in Hebrew, which the king does not understand, and she's encouraging her sons to continue enduring the torture until they breathe their last, because they're going to be looking at a life beyond this life. Now, most Jews did not yet believe in that concept, especially the Sadducee party. The Pharisees believed in it, but the Sadducees did not. That's why I always say that's why they were Sadducee. They did not honor a faith in God that carried on through to the next life. Mom did, the mother Maccabees, and so did her sons. Indeed, so much so that down to the youngest son, and finally, Mom herself, they are all horrifically tortured and retain the faith, stay faithful to Yahweh. So they have quite a reputation in the Old Testament, what we call the Old Testament. Jewish people honor them highly, as they well might. But then there's the gospel having to do with the same thing as far as life beyond death. the Sadducees, again the unbelievers, they asked Jesus, what happens when a man dies and he leaves his wife childless? Who is she to marry? Well, she marries the next brother. The next brother to her husband is supposed to take her in as his wife. And then they ask, well, what happens if she bears him no children at that point? What sort of a future does she have? Well, she marries the third brother. Well, they're like the Maccabees, there just happen to be 7 brothers. She marries all of them and is childless after each of them. And so the Sadducees are trying to really make sport of life beyond death. They make it look ridiculous. So whose wife is she, they ask, in the life beyond death? And Jesus said, there's no marrying in heaven. I think now that scares a lot of us because we're saying, well, what do you mean I won't be able to see my spouse in heaven or my family? No, a marriage in heaven, we will recognize our earthly spouse and family, of course, and rejoice in them being in the kingdom with us. But marriage is not the same kind of thing in heaven as it is here on earth. For one thing, there's no more propagating, the kingdom itself. Doors are closed now. Gates are closed. That's it. But we have a wondrous, wondrous life to look to beyond this. I buried quite a few people lately in the last few weeks. Mostly elderly people, spouses, usually of a surviving spouse, and how difficult it is for the surviving spouse to continue on without this truly soulmate person in their lives. But what carries them through, honest to goodness, with each of these funerals I've done, is their faith that there is so much more waiting for us all, and waiting for the husband or wife, the widow or widower who joins the loved one beyond death. Jesus has made all that possible for us. I'm gotta close now, but I know that you're just waiting on tiptoes for one of my jokes. Last Sunday, a little girl came to church. I asked one of my jokes, and I had told it on the podcast last week. I asked a question, and she was way in back of church. Cute little girl. And she screamed out the answer, and of course she was right, because she had watched this podcast, or her mother told her the joke. What do you call a car that writes its own story? An autobiography. Isn't that good? Scott likes it anyway. I don't know. Well, I went to the store to get a book on turtles. And the clerk asked if, the hardback? And I said, yes, but they also have a little tiny head. I think that's really good. And I will give you a finally, okay. Why couldn't Beethoven find his teacher? Because he was hiding. Happy week.